We have anyone in yet?
Yes, we have 10 participants so far.
Are they in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hi everybody. It's 11 a.m. This is scheduled to start at 11 a.m., but we have more people registered. So we're going to wait a few minutes. We will make up that time at the end. Um, and happy to see all the folks that are on here already. So thanks for taking your time today, and I'll talk to you in about 11:02 or so. Okay. Okay, it's 11:03. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. If you know anyone that's going to be joining us who are going to be a little late, we will just, as a reminder, we are recording this. And if you are signed up through our invite, you will get an email with the recording. So even if you can't make it, or even if you have to drop off or anything like that, you will be able to join us whenever it is convenient for you. Also, I would note that if you are seeking credit for this, we had this set for, I believe, April 1st with the Missouri Bar. I still need to update this to the date. So if you need the number for it, let me know. I did not get a chance to do that when we changed it, so forgive me for that. Okay, so we're going to talk about data centers and demand. It's a big topic. It is an extensive topic. It is something that has a lot of implications on energy policy, and so we are going to try to address all of that here in this nice, tidy 50-minute hour that we have slated for this. Of course, there's a lot more to this than just simply what we have that we're going to discuss here, but we certainly would be interested in talking to you offline, or if you have questions as we go along, I think it will be helpful. So let's get to it. Next slide, please. So who is Renew Missouri? We do this in every one of our CLEs. We were founded in 2006. We were almost 20 years old. We were founded to advance renewable energy and energy efficiency in the state of Missouri. In that time, we have worked on legislation. We passed a statewide ballot initiative. We have worked on ordinances and statutes, and we've represented these interests before regulators, not only in Missouri, but also in places like Kansas, Kentucky. We have worked in multiple states as well as at the federal level. That's who we are, what we do. We do work largely on utility issues. We do largely work with utility companies. We work before regulators, like say with Ameren, Evergy, Liberty Empire. It's important to note that a lot of what we're talking about here is going to be focused on like what investor-owned utilities are doing, because there's some legislation that has just passed both chambers that we feel is relevant and germane for that. And we are also working with the city offices because there are some municipal utilities around the state, like Columbia, Springfield, Independence, Kirkwood. Those are the four big ones. There's 85 in all. We also work with member owners at rural electric cooperatives, 43 distributive co-ops around the state. So we listen to our supporters about ideas. We work to convert those into policies. So obviously, if you have ideas or want to talk about things with us, we would encourage it. Next slide, please. And who am I? Why, I'm James Owen. I'm the executive director of Renew Missouri. I am an attorney by trade and by experience. I'm also a former associate circuit judge. Boy, I've really lunched out a lot of that 11 months I was a judge. As well as the short period of time I was public counsel, where I advocated for Missouri ratepayers before the Public Service Commission. That is a job that got me into the energy sector and to utility policies 9 years ago. I was doing that job, so that's kind of exciting. I have run this organization for about 8 years, but my humble origins are from Webster County. I was born and raised on a dairy farm there. So, you know, if you ever catch me being too highfalutin, just remember that I used to shovel cow manure for a living. So that's, I'm certainly relieved I'm not doing that anymore. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what are we talking about today? We have the introduction. We're going to talk a little bit about projections in regards to data centers and demand, upcoming projects. We're going to address the question of whether utilities can meet this demand right now. Because we are a renewable energy organization that we're working on energy efficiency and renewable energy, we are going to talk a little bit about. I want to be clear that we're not saying don't use gas to generate power. I don't want that to be the message from this, but we do want to point out what we think are some of the problems and concerns with using gas, which I consider that to be somewhat different than just being an anti-gas, anti-nuclear, anti-coal organization. I don't think of us as anti-coal or anti-gas, but we do feel it is important to point out because there has been a lot of discussion about how effective and reliant and adequate these resources are as far as natural gas. We feel like it is important to note some of the issues there, as well as in the same vein, talking about renewable solutions and talking about why we believe renewable energy can help meet some of this demand and deal with some of these data center issues. That's our overview. Next slide, please. Okay, data center growth. Okay, this is, I don't really know if we necessarily have a lot of information specific as far as a macro view of Missouri, but we can talk a little bit about energy consumption in the US. And I think that this is relatively similar to what we've seen in Missouri. In the US from 2014 to 2016, after a minimal growth in 2010, energy consumption has been relatively stable. And what I would say about Missouri is it has been flat. It's been kind of at a plateau. GPUs, I mean, like, let's just be honest. What's driving a lot of this is the technology that's in your pocket, right? The cell phone, computers, more of our economy, more of our business is done by phones. It's done by the internet. It's done on computer screens. A lot of our lives at home, our residences, those are driven by our ability to process information and process data. When you think a lot about the fact that we used to have cable TV and now we have streaming services and all of that comes from the internet, that's an issue as well. So the introduction of graphic processing units, GPUs, accelerated servers in 2017. We have a question. Is the aluminum smelter closed in New Madrid? Isn't there a lot of excess power available because that smelter closed? Okay. I'm going to stop with my, I'm going to finish uh, this particular, slide here. And I'm going to answer that question here in a minute. Because it's a good question. It's actually a very good question. Estimate that data centers account for around 4.4 or 4.4% of global energy consumption. That is as of 2023. Oh, what happened? Uh-oh. Uh-oh, there we go. All right. We promised we went through a technical run through of this. Can we go back? I think we're still on the other slide. Nope. Keep going back. Keep going back. Keep going back. Keep going back. Oh, keep going. I think you're going forward. Okay, there we go. That is the right one. No, that's the wrong one. That's the right one. Okay. All right. Okay, so I was saying the GPUs, accelerated servers in 2017, that correlated with rapid growth of energy consumption from 2017 to 2024. Growth is expected to reach 6.7 of global energy consumption by 2028. That's from 4.4% in 2023. And in the next 5 years, energy demand could increase by 38 gigawatts, which is the equivalent of adding another California to the grid. That's a lot. Okay, so that's that slide. Let me answer this question. The aluminum smelter in New Madrid, which I call Mag 7 Metals because that is the company that currently owns that particular aluminum smelter. It is no longer producing aluminum. The phrase is not that it is closed, but it is curtailed, which is to say, while they are not producing any more material, they are not running their smelter. They have to continue running electricity through that plant, because it is because if you don't do that and these pots stop being operational even for a little bit, it basically makes the whole plant worthless, and it is not not great shape as it is. Now the question is there a lot of excess power available because that smelter closed? Okay. So they get a lot of their power from the New Madrid plant in, it's literally next door. There's a coal plant that is next door. It is owned by Associated Electric Cooperative, which is the power supplier for the co-ops in Missouri, as well as eastern Oklahoma and southern Iowa. It is currently only running at 70% capacity. That is because of an EPA DNR order that is basically saying it is not healthy. It is essentially like putting too much emissions in the air, and so it is limited at about 70% of its capacity, that power plant. And before the plant closed, half of the power that that plant was running was going to Mag 7 Metals. So I don't have recent information about how much power it's using now, because it is still using power, but just not at the capacity it once was. But it is safe to say, yes, it is hard to keep up with who owns these assets and how much they use. That's exactly right, because people who have been around for a while will recall that the Mag 7 Metals plant used to be known as the Noranda plant, and that was when Ameren was providing power to the Noranda plant, but they stopped doing that, I think, in 2018. Yeah, the new owners, when they got bought out, because Noranda went bankrupt, the new owners ended up inking a deal with Associated Electric. So that's why that has changed. Now, is there more power available? Uh, I'm almost certain, while I don't have the exact numbers because the Mag 7 Metals plant became laid off their workers and became curtailed in early 2024. I don't think we have numbers on how much they're using now, but they are certainly not using as much as they did. And I can certainly tell you that Associated Electric would like to see, well, they'd like to have it is they would probably like to see some more power get used by somebody. Because the other challenge, and this is really getting into the weeds on this, is that New Madrid's plant is only marginally is only kind of tangentially connected to the grid. AECI is not a member of any transmission organization. They have a relationship, they have contracts with so let's say MISO, but they are not a member, so therefore they can't go trade that power with other utilities. So there is capacity on the grid if you are Associated Electric. But the problem is they're not connected to Ameren, they're not connected to Evergy, they're not connected to pretty much anywhere else. So that is so while there is this excess power that's being produced, it's not necessarily something that's easily transferred to anyone else. I know there's a lot of interest in that plant, including I can tell you there's been some people who have been wanting to put a data center in that plant, but not much action. Okay, I hope that helps. All right, next slide, please. I am certain Abby, my producer, is losing her mind because I'm only like 5 or 6 slides in. I'm already I'm already behind, but this is good because I want to have these conversations. Okay, data centers are getting larger. Use of artificial intelligence is increasing at a rapid rate. Annual growth rate of AI, artificial intelligence, is expected to be 36.6% between 2023 and 2030. Data centers with AI require on average of 500 megawatts to 600 megawatts of power. And, you know, in January of this year, President Biden, before he left office, signed an executive order to boost onshore AI data center operations. Now, President Biden almost certainly probably saw that as being in tangent with some of his energy policies that he was pushing with the Inflation Reduction Act and trying to minimize fossil fuels. But as we all know, President Biden is no longer president, and there is a new sheriff in town, as the euphemism goes. Now, I want to point out something about this AI because there are these estimates and there are these growth rates, and one thing I would position on that, because I am by no means an expert on AI or anything like that. However, what you are seeing is continued innovations in AI deployment, AI development. Like I would urge you to look up this company in China called DeepSeek. DeepSeek is a company that has somehow used AI to produce more advanced AI using those models and codes and that sort of thing. And they're able to do that without using excessive power. So I would note that these are annual growth rates based on what we already have, but AI is so nascent and is still evolving that it's hard to even say like where we are going to go with AI. Again, look up DeepSeek and you tell me if you think that that we have any kind of finality on how much demand we're really going to have based on that technology. I can tell you, you can also see that there are some contracts that various companies like Microsoft, who thought they were going to need excess power or a lot of power, that were engaged in that. They are no longer in those contracts. So there is a progression there to where maybe energy consumption is not going to be as significant. Okay, next slide, please. So you're talking about upcoming projects. And this doesn't, I mean, I know that this doesn't even include the Meta project that is in Kansas City, but let's talk about the ones that are here. Tier Point, St. Louis, it's $150 million investment. It's going to be downtown St. Louis. 80 construction jobs, 9 permanent jobs. Okay, this is another thing too. And this is a point that always comes up when we talk about solar projects or wind projects. There we talk about economic development, we talk about jobs. A lot of those jobs are temporary. A lot of those jobs are building, construction. The permanency of those jobs are not there. There are not that many permanent jobs associated with data centers, same way that there's not really a lot of permanent jobs associated with power generation for wind or solar. So just to point that out. First phase of the Tier Point St. Louis calls for 5 megawatts of utility power. They will ultimately increase to 20 megawatts, and they are using Ameren Missouri Smart Energy Plan, which I would note is essentially the plan that kind of goes along with some of the reforms and changes that were made to utility rate making back in 2018 under Senate Bill 564, where we had the concept of the plant and service accounting that was initially introduced. We're going to talk a little bit about plant and service accounting here in a bit. Plant and service accounting is kind of like what I've always heard described as QWIP light, construction work in progress light, which allows for recovery of certain projects, just simply based on the fact that they have been conceived and that they're being built. That's Tier Point. Edged in Kansas City. I have no idea what Tier Point Edged are, by the way, but they are data centers nonetheless. It's a $143 million investment and will provide 26 megawatts of critical capacity. It is intended to be a ultra efficient facility, uses no water and cooling, and 74% less energy overhead than conventional data centers. That's really amazing. That's very awesome. One of the things that Renew Missouri is a big fan of is energy efficiency. We believe that the reduction of demand and the reduction of consumption in power is just as important as to where that power comes from. We're big believers in trying to get those numbers reduced. And it is great to see that that is being taken advantage of there. Okay. And that's in collaboration with Evergy. We spelled that wrong. Sorry, we didn't catch that, but that's Evergy, not Every. I mean, can you blame us? I mean, some of these titles, some of these names of these companies are a little funny. And Spire. So it's they're working with the utilities on that. Then there is Google. That is a $1 billion investment. That is increasing efficiency, computing 4 times power than 5 years ago using the same amount of electricity. Right now, it is our understanding this is relying entirely on a 5,000-acre solar farm in Henry County that is being built by Ranger Power, which they're going to turn over to Evergy, and that is going to be offsetting the power that Google is using. There's going to be 1,000 construction jobs associated with this project, but 1,400 permanent jobs. That is a big project. That is going to be a big deal. And it's also going to lead to $1 million annually in tax revenue. That Google investment is significant. That's going to be a very big project. And I should note that project being built in Henry County as we speak, the sole reason for that is that being built is because of this Google plant, which is one of the things that we have attempted to point out to a number of people, is that a lot of these companies, entities that are wanting to build data centers, that are looking at AI, they do have sustainability goals baked into their not their mission statements, but into their shareholder decrees and in their shareholders kind of directives. So we are seeing a lot of renewable energy getting built around that. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is something that was shared a little bit ago on the Missouri Scout page that I lifted. I thought this was kind of interesting. It's the concentration of data center employment in quarter two of 2023. Um, Now, this is not, I want to make sure this is clear. This is the percentage of data center jobs. You see, Texas and California have 10% or more of data center jobs. Missouri, it looks to me like that is the 2% to 4.99%. Although that could be that I'm not really discerning the shades of blue very well. I think that's right. But most states don't have, they have less than 1%. And so they don't have very much. I think when I first read this, it was a little confusing to me because you could have read it as, oh, this is the percentage of employment for the entire state. Not the case. Not the case. This is the percentage of employment for data centers. So Texas and California definitely leading the charge there. Washington, Georgia, Florida, New York also have a lot of these positions. And then Missouri is kind of in the middle of the pack there, as we tend to be on a lot of things. So that I thought was interesting and I want to share with all of you. Next slide, please. Can utilities meet demand? The utility companies will tell you that they are not able to do that right now. They will say there is an issue with the fact that they are not able to build generation quickly enough. But there is also the issue of, do we have the transmission system capacity? Do we have the ability to distribute this? And there's also a question of who's going to pay for all of that. But then there's also the issue of siting challenges and local resistance. I can tell you that in dealing with solar projects, wind projects, there is a lot of local resistance. There is resistance from local county officials. There is resistance from property owners who are nearby those properties. They do not like the idea of these projects being near their homes or their businesses, and they are very well organized, and so that proves to be a problem. Gas plants tend to, we're going to talk a little bit about gas plants. Gas plants tend to not have as much resistance or siting challenges because they're largely being constructed at old coal plants. So any concerns that people had about that is largely offset by the fact that there's already been electric generation that's already been there, and that there's a belief that that gas facility is going to be pushing less emissions in the air. It's certainly not pushing carbon into the air. And so, when you hear utilities talk about how they're going to be going carbon free, they are moving in that direction, but it is certainly not at a point where they are reducing their fossil fuel output into the air. So there are a lot of challenges in any form of building generation, building transmission. And then there's also a question of how the distribution system capacity is going to work. Part of that can also be that a lot of these companies want to have a generation at the point of distribution, but that is not allowed by Missouri law right now. Certainly utilities have a lot of heartburn about letting a big producer produce their own power, just because they're worried about this is not my phrase, this is an actual phrase, the death spiral, that if larger customers become more independent, that is going to put more of the cost onto smaller residential and business customers. And so then it's just going to make it impossible for them to pay those bills if the large utility customers are not paying into the system. Okay, next slide. So what utilities have done, or what they are doing here in Missouri, is they are looking to natural gas. We just had back in the fall Ameren come in with a significant request to build, I think 750 megawatt gas plant called Castle Bluff. That was vigorously challenged by groups like Renew Missouri, but we ended up settling it. We ended up like getting some other concessions from the utility on it that were kind of helped offset some of our concerns about that. And right now, Evergy, on the western side of the state, not only has a proposal before the Missouri Public Service Commission, but also before the Kansas Corporation Commission, which is the Missouri equivalent of the Public Service Commission over in Topeka. That case, just in case you don't know, is scheduled to go before regulators in Kansas April 21st through the 23rd. So that's coming up here in a couple of weeks. There's a settlement conference scheduled for that tomorrow. We can't talk a lot about the details in that. I wish I could. There's a lot of interesting developments that have gone on with that case. But I've signed an NDA and I can't talk, and I don't have the parameters of what I can and can't talk about there. But Kansas has just recently passed a bill that would allow for construction work in progress that would be allowing utility companies to not delay putting the cost of the constructing these plants into rate base prior to their completion and they're being used. I mean, right now, I could say right now, currently, there's a law in the books that was passed by voters in 1976 that prohibited construction work in progress from being an accounting procedure that could be used by utility companies and being approved by the Public Service Commission. That is going to be overturned by Senate Bill 4, which was passed by the House on March 14th. I believe that it is going to be signed by Governor Kehoe tomorrow. And that is in addition to having the construction work in progress for gas. It's also going to have plant and service accounting for gas, which was a exemption carved out for PISA back in 2018 through negotiation. That has now been reestablished into the law. Senate Bill 4 also does a bunch of other things. We talked a little bit about future test years on here, but that doesn't have an impact on electricity. That's going to largely be going benefiting gas companies like Spire and water companies like Missouri American Water. But there is also a significant change to how integrated resource planning is going to be done. Someday we are going to do a whole CLE on that because that is a big deal, and that also involves QUIP as well. But it's a little more electric generation neutral. But I think we're planning on doing a Senate Bill 4 webinar on Friday, June 13th. So mark your calendars for that. And I also would note, because I see some folks on here who are representing other various interests, that I see a question. I'm gonna answer that question when we get to it. When I get done with this. So this does not apply to municipal utilities. It does not apply to rural electric cooperatives. This only applies to the utilities that are regulated by the Public Service Commission. That would be Ameren, that would be Evergy, that would be Liberty Empire. Those are going to be the electric utilities that are going to benefit from Senate Bill 4. We have a question. How realistic is that death spiral if point of source generation were allowed? Seems like things like QUIP are already causing small consumers to foot the bill. Okay, yeah, look, I don't know how realistic it is or not. I know it's a concept that, I mean, when I was a consumer advocate, we were very concerned about it. We were very concerned about the fact that because you would be like, let's say if the Fords and the General Motors and the large corporate industrial commercial users in Missouri were able to produce their own power and they were not paying into the system. That utility companies who are footing the bill for building generation for all customers, because their obligation is to provide safe, reliable power for all Missourians. They are building transmission projects. They are maintaining and developing distribution. That if all of a sudden because I can tell you, like, as an example right now, we were just talking about magnitude 7 metals. Does anybody want to take a guess at how much their utility bill was a year. No, that's going to take too long to guess. It was around 57 million dollars a year. Um, Based on public records that we had when they were going at full capacity. I mean, that is a lot of money for one customer to pay. I would say that probably GM and Ford are not quite that much, but they're probably pretty close. Um, they're the largest user in the state. That's right. And I think Doe Run is second. Their facility in Viburnum, Missouri is second. Um, but yeah, I mean, that kind of work sucks out a lot of power. It's a lot of power. Um, I would say, but I ultimately believe, that if we have, I mean, it is my personal opinion that if we have Quip, and we are front loading these costs, my concern is ultimately not that, because I hear people say, oh, we're front loading these costs, but they're costs that people are going to pay eventually anyway. Okay, maybe under optimal circumstances, they would be costs. But then there's the question from my mind of stranded assets and whether or not these natural gas plants are going to be needed. I mean, we talked a little bit about, whether or not the demand for AI is actually going to require more of this electricity to be used. There's still an open question about that, in my opinion. But there's also the question of what future federal presidential administrations are going to say about natural gas. Yes, right now we have a very pro fossil fuel friendly administration. Is that going to be the case in 2029? Is that going to be the case in 2033? My suspicion is that, like everything else, politics goes into cycles. There are cycles where we're going to see more fossil fuel friendly policies, and there's going to be cycles where we see antipathy towards fossil fuels. And when that antipathy hits, I'm worried that these natural gas plants are going to be stranded. They are not going to be used, and the money that was front loaded into them is going to be lost. And I think that's ultimately what we have to worry about as far as Quip, just because there's so much changing and there's so many concerns about that. That would ultimately be my concern about Quip if I were still still a consumer protection advocate. And it's still kind of my concern as someone who is an advocate for clean energy. I hope that helped answer that question. Let's move on.
James, really quick before we move on, we had a question from an Aaron Young in the Q&A section about Bitcoin. I had answered it just by typing to the best of my ability, but I was wondering if you had anything you wanted to edit to that or add on. Aaron Young asked, how much of the estimated
Oh,
GPU capacity, do you see it?
yes, I see
Uh,
it. Okay,
yeah,
okay, that's a good answer. How much is that GPU capacity used for Bitcoin mining? Like, how much is that from Bitcoin?
I had
And go
I
ahead,
had
Abby.
found by I had found by Googling that the U.S. Energy Information Administration states that the annual electricity use from cryptocurrency mining probably represents from 0.6% to 2.3% of U.S. electricity consumption. I had compared that to what we have on our slideshow
Hmm.
of AI data centers being expected to reach globally 6.7% of energy use, and just kind of making a comparison there, I had said that AI data centers are probably much more of a concern at the present time.
Well, Abby Dickinson, our producer for for this webinar, you did a heck of a job with answering that. But it's good that we shared that with the rest of the folks on here because I completely missed that Q&A. I hope that helped Aaron answer with that question. And but it's a good question because Bitcoin mining. Yeah, I can tell you that when I started working at Renew Missouri, which was in 2017, Bitcoin was all anybody wanted to talk about. I know it is still a significant consumer of energy. Um, I don't know like what the estimates of that are now. You don't hear as much about Bitcoin as you used to, but then I'm just older and I don't know anything. I just don't hear a lot about it in terms of energy consumption because that's kind of one of those things I'm hired and paid to follow. So I don't know if Bitcoin is still the same concern as it has been, but that is, I think that ultimately is what was driving that back in 2017 and 2018. Thanks, Abby. Next slide, please. All right, so the problem with gas. Okay, again, same caveat. I'm a clean energy advocate. That does not include natural gas generation for power. So, if you feel like there's a bias to this, or you feel like that I am not being fair to gas, well, I mean, certainly you have heard the arguments in favor of gas. These are just some of the counterpoints that we would like to throw out there. Natural gas has been found to be unreliable during extreme weather events, threatening grid instability. Power outages have doubled in the past 20 years throughout this country, in part due to the increased frequency of extreme weather events. That is something Renew Missouri is very worried about, is the fact that we are seeing more extreme weather. I don't think you have to look very far more than the past couple of weeks where you've seen Southeast Missouri get hit by rain and tornadoes and wind, and it's just been this bruising, brutal amount of weather that is, I think, by all definitions, unusual or a little weird. So you can call it extreme, you can call it weird, you can call it unusual, call it whatever you like. It's abnormal. And we can talk about like what causes that, but that again is a whole other webinar. 70% of forced outages during Winter Storm Elliott in 2022 were caused by failed gas plants. I will add a caveat to that. All right, Winter Storm Elliott was that was the one. I was trying to remember what year. I think that was in January of 2022. That there certainly have been advances in weatherization for gas plants. There's been advances in weatherization for wind, that sort of thing. And so, but still, gas is a fluid, gas is a liquid, and gas is going to be susceptible to freezing. That's obviously a problem. I mean, to be fair, it's also a problem when the extreme weather is wind and it's cold and it's cloudy. That's going to be a problem for solar. So I just want to make sure that's clear. I'm not just, ragging on gas. Extreme heat events also cause strain on the grid. And so, obviously when those extreme weather events happen, and the question is whether or not gas is going to be able to keep up with that. Data centers require constant energy supply, and any outages could have significant financial repercussions. Next slide, please. There's other issues. Price volatility. Natural gas prices have increased 80% since last year. There is still an open question as to what the tariffs that were announced last week is going to do to natural gas. Certainly that has the potential to have an increase on all products that we're buying outside of the country, which a lot of what we're getting out of the United States is going to be energy related. Like, for example, the Canadian, I guess basically we've got a trade war with Canada now, where we're getting a lot of oil and gas, where we're getting a lot of gas from them. What impact is that going to have on the cost? Is it going to keep going up? Is this really going to be the most cost-effective solution for customers? Is it going to be really the most cost-effective solution for utility companies? Hard to say. That I kind of skipped over the long construction periods and cost effectiveness. I've been reading that essentially because there is such a demand for gas plants right now that turbines for gas plants are taking anywhere from 5 to 6 years to become available. There's a podcast out there with a gentleman from ERCOT, which is the Texas grid, where he's essentially talking about how they do not believe that they're going to be able to complete any gas plant projects until 2030. If there is an immediate need for data centers and there's an immediate need for this demand, that doesn't seem like an immediate solution to this. If we're talking about 5, 6, 7 years, that does not seem like that's going to be the solution to this, which is one of the other critiques we have about Senate Bill 4, and one of these critiques we have about some of these gas plants. And there's also the general concerns about air pollution and public health. Again, it is my opinion that a lot of policymakers and lawmakers in Missouri don't care about those particular issues. They should. There are external costs that go along with that. There are healthcare costs that go along with that. There are all sorts of issues that go along with that. But what really I think should be emphasized again and again is the fact that there are going to be federal guidelines and federal rules and regulations that might be offset now, that might not be looked at right now, they might not be enforced right now. But that is not to say that there's not going to be another federal administration coming up here in the next short-term period that will be enforcing those, and that some of these gas plants are not going to be able to be in compliance. And that is, I think, why the air pollution and public health issue should be of a concern to Missouri regulators. Okay, next slide, please. And as Elise Schaefer from the Missouri Coalition for the Environment notes, if you're concerned about heat now, 100+ degree days are expected to double in St. Louis in the next 30 years. That's right. I think you're just going to start seeing if we don't do anything to reduce how much junk we're pumping into the air, you're only going to see the weather get more unstable. So we've got some nice charts here where we're looking at the gas prices. If you look at these, you can look at these are for pretty recent. These are pretty recent numbers, and we're talking about sometimes a little hard to read. But it's going back several years, and you can kind of see those spikes. I think like some of those spikes are definitely coming from the fact that we had in the mid-aughts, we had conflicts in the Middle East, which was causing issues with gas prices. And also disruptions from Russia, disruptions from COVID. And there's a lot. And I mean, the reality is when you're talking about wind and solar, you don't have that kind of volatility. Because there's no fuel that goes along with it. There are these increases there. You see from the New York commodity information. So we got all that information from the Public Service Commission. Next slide, please. Yeah, again, you can look at all these numbers, and you can look at gas prices, exports, that sort of thing. It is just simply a volatile. It's hard to predict, right? It's hard to predict when we're going to have a trade war. It's hard to predict when we're going to have a war. It's hard to predict when we're going to have extreme weather that's going to have an impact on natural gas. It is Renew Missouri's belief that when you're focusing more on clean energy options, those are all things that can be domestically sourced. Those are all things that we have control over within our borders. And that's important when we're factoring in how much this is actually going to cost over time. Those are just some numbers that you can have. You will get these slides along with the recording. We can do that, right, Abby? We can send those slides along with us.
Yes, I do that anyways.
Okay, well, good. Well, thank you for doing that. We'll make sure everyone gets this. Okay, next slide, please. You've heard me complain about gas. Let's talk about what we think is, a possible solution to this. So yes, again, we are a clean energy advocacy group. So this is going to be, I mean, you give me a hammer, I'm going to find a nail, right? So I'm just throwing that out there. But I mean, the reality is, and I want to go to the bottom one real fast. The Google's data center in Kansas City relies entirely on this 5,000-acre solar farm that we were talking about earlier in this presentation. Google has sustainability goals. Their shareholders are demanding it. They're going to be looking for states that have access to clean energy to be able to offset the power they're using. If you don't have clean energy options, if you're not prepared to do that, you're just simply not going to get these businesses here. And I understand there are some data centers that do not have those goals and do not have those ideas in mind. But when you look at all of the corporate all the corporate programs that are being filed in front of the Missouri Public Service Commission right now, it's not just data centers. It's not just these high electric users. It's companies like Walmart. It's companies like other, retail big box stores that are asking for solar to be built in order for them to be able to offset their power consumption with those projects. That is what is driving demand. That is what is driving people to move to states like Missouri. That's just a reality. When you look at the Panasonic plant that's being built in DeSoto, Kansas, right across the border from Missouri in Johnson County, Kansas, a majority of that power is going to be coming from wind. The Meta plant, the Meta data center that's being built in Kansas City is getting a lot of its power from Evergy, from wind. That's where they're getting it. And they're increasingly looking for states that are going to be able to deliver on that. And that is going to be ultimately why I think that that's one reason why we should be looking more at renewable solutions as opposed to natural gas plants. Next slide, please. And, they are reliable. Like I think during extreme heat, in Texas, when we had a 10-day heat wave in Texas last summer, renewable energy support accounted for nearly half the electricity demand during that record-breaking power use. When it's hot, the sun is out. When the sun is out, that's when solar can do the most amount of work for you. Renewable sources accounted for 14% of electricity net generation in Missouri in 2023. Yes, that is coupled with the 60% that we're using for coal and the 15% we're using for natural gas. But the reality is, here's another thing I want to add, because I don't think this is in the next slide. If it is, forgive me. We're talking about immediate demand. We're talking about immediate solutions. Solar plus storage capacity can be built in 18 months. 18. That's a year and a half. When we're talking about 5, 6, 7 years for a natural gas plant, the reality is that if you're saying this demand is immediate and we're needing to do this right now, they're going to be looking for places that can build that quicker, and that's going to be solar plus storage. Let me get to storage here in a minute. Let's go to that slide just real quick. Okay, yeah, battery energy storage systems are a solution for demand issues. Yes, again, the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow, but if you have the battery energy storage system that enables the storage of electrical energy to be used when needed most, it improves resiliency and reliability. Ameren, Missouri, part of the settlement that we reached with them over that gas plant that they were wanting to build, that Castle Bluff system that they are building now. Part of that was their commitment to build about 150 megawatts of battery and solar storage at a former coal plant. We've gotten a 60-day notice that they're going to be filing something like that, plus an additional 50 megawatts of battery storage. And so we are looking forward to that going before regulators and hopefully that getting approved by 2026, as well as an additional 800 megawatts by 2032. We are starting to see more of this as a solution. I believe that is going to be helpful in addressing the issues of volatility, as well as some of these issues that we're dealing with as far as trade, and also just the general volatility of those pricing. Next slide, please. And there's also, while there's a lot of uncertainty about federal money coming in on these projects, there is still the Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Funds from the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, to put battery storage at retired fossil fuel plants. We are very hopeful that some of the utilities can take advantage of that. It is cost effective compared to alternative sources, especially when you're looking at that funding, and is not as reliant on scarce resources. I shouldn't say scarce resources, but volatile resources. So next slide. Okay, I went a minute over. But if you have any questions, we've answered a lot of questions. I'm happy to answer them later. Can we go to the next slide? That's our information. We have a new address. So if you want to send us money, don't send it to the old address. That's our phone number, email address that goes to my email. So I will get that. Plus we're on Instagram. And you can also find us online at renewmo.org. Okay, it's 11:54. I started at 11:03. I gave you an extra minute. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your interest, and I thank you for attending this webinar. And we hope to give you information on anything coming up in the near future. Take care and have a good Tuesday, everybody.